Hi everyone. In this session, we will talk about some applications based on this demand and supply framework. The first example we will be talking about is the labor markets. So in the labor market, we can still have labor demand and labor supply. Labor markets can reflect both supply and demand for labor, right? So the firms and employers, they demand labor. We have this downward sloping labor demand curve, right? And also the individuals and workers, they will supply labor. So we have this upward sloping labor supply curve because if the wage goes up, we can see more people get willing to work. So we can think of the wage as the price of the labor, similar as the case when we have a general good, right? And we can think of the number of workers as the quantity of labor supplied and demanded. So basically, it's the same framework, but with a very specific application to the labor market. So it's a very natural question to ask, like, what factors will shift demand for labor, right? So firstly, we can see the changes in demand for the end product will shift the labor demand because suppose the demand for the end product increase, the company will find it will be profitable to expand the production, so they will demand more labor. So the increase in the demand for end product will increase the demand for labor. Right? Also, the changes in labor productivity will also change our labor demand. Because if you can remember, the labor demand curve can be regarded as the marginal benefit or marginal from hiring extra labor, right? So if the labor productivity changes, companies will find that it will be more profitable if I hire more labor, so that will naturally increase the labor demand. We can also consider the changes in technology, right? But the direction of the effect is kind of ambiguous because the technology can have different effects if we believe that the technology is complementary to labor or substitute labor. That will have different effect, right? Suppose our generative AI, if we believe that AI will replace human workers, the improvement of that AI technology will decrease labor demand, right? But instead, if we believe that generative AI is complementary to labor, so that if we believe that will increase the labor productivity, the firms will find it's profitable to hire more labor, more workers, right? So that will increase the labor demand. Also, the changes in the number of employers will also change labor demand. So if we have more companies, more employers will have a more higher labor demand. And changes in government regulations will also change our labor demand. And also the changes in the price or availability of related inputs. So suppose if we find that the related inputs, the price decreased, right? The firms want to expand their production, so they will have a higher labor demand. Similarly, we can consider what factors will shift the supply of labor. First, the changes in the number of workers. So there, suppose we have a higher population or immigrants, right? In that case, there will be more people who are willing to work. So that will be an increase in the labor supply. And changes in required skills, training, or education. So that will also shift the labor supply. Suppose we have a job that requires higher education or some certain certifications, right? In that case, the people who are qualified for that work the number will decrease, right? So the labor supply will naturally decrease. And changes in workers' opportunity cost of working will also definitely change our labor supply, right? So because if you imagine when people are deciding whether to work or not, they are comparing the benefit of working or other choices, right? Suppose I have a better opportunity to go to the college to pursue a higher degree. The opportunity cost of working will be higher because if I go to work very early, I cannot go to the college, right? So if that's the case, uh, an expansion of the college or higher education system will reduce our labor supply because that will be more people who are willing to go to the college instead of working at a very early age, right? And also the changes in government policies will also change our labor supply. So now we can use this framework to analyze some examples. One example is we can see how it will going to be like for the US labor markets in the long run. So in these years, a very significant problem faced by development economies is the aging society, because we see that people are less willing to give birth to kids, so the birth rate get decreased. And at the same time, we see that the older people will account for a larger and larger proportion for the whole population, right? So if there are less young people who are willing and can work, we can expect that the labor force participation rates will decrease because there will be less people working, right? So if you see this figure, that's a prediction about the US labor force participation rates until 2097. So we can see that we can expect a continuing decrease in the labor force participation rates because we are facing with the aging of the population. Right now, you can pause the video to think about how will this alter the labor market? Is that a demand change or a supply change? Right, and which direction? So that's a supply change, right? Because that will change the number of workers. So the population will reduce labor supply because there will be less people working. So we can see there will be a supply shift to the left, right? So in the end, we will see the price going up and quantity going down because we are going from the initial equilibrium to this new equilibrium. So we'll see an increase in price and decrease in quantity. So that means the wage will going up and there will be less people working, right? Now, if we consider another force, which is the generative AI, if you can see from the figure here, this figure shows the proportion of work activities that can be automated by 2030. So the gray points represents the case where there is no generative AI, and the blue points will represent the case with generative AI. Right? So if we can see that the automation is being sped up by the evolution of generative AI by a lot, right? So if we believe that the generative AI will replace human work, how will this alter the labor market? Please think for a minute about this question. Is it a demand change or supply change? And which direction? So that should be a demand change, right? If we see the workers can be replaced by AI, the demand for labor will decrease, right? So we go from the initial equilibrium here to the first equilibrium because we saw a decrease in labor supply by aging population. Now, if we add another change, which is the evolution of generative AI, and we can see the decrease in demand because of automation, we're going further to the third equilibrium here, right? So from second equilibrium to the third equilibrium, we'll see a wage going down because the demand is shift to the left and the quantity going down, right? Now, if we combine the two forces and compare the changes from the initial equilibrium here to our final equilibrium here, what's the effect? Actually, the price effect or the wage is ambiguous because the shift in labor supply will increase wage, but the shift in labor demand will decrease wage. So if we add the two effects together in total, it's hard to say whether the net effect is positive or negative, right? So the wage is ambiguous, but the quantity is going down because both changes will decrease the employment, right? So that's the effect of in the labor market in the long run. Another example here is the minimum wage. So minimum wage can be regarded as an example of the price floor, right? Because that's equivalent to set a minimum price. You cannot give any price lower than this level. So that's a floor, right? So if we initially start from the initial equilibrium defined by labor supply and demand, now we have some minimum wage above the equivalent price. We will see some supply surplus, right? Or the unemployment, because if we have the minimum wage, the labor demand is until Q, because the wage is high. The companies, they are willing to hire less employment, so they are only willing to hire until here. But because the wage is high, people are willing to going to find a job, so there will be more people who's willing to work. So that the difference between supply and demand will be unemployment, which will be the people who cannot find a job, right? So our model prediction will be like if we increase the minimum wage, we should see a decrease in employment, right? So in the reality, people do find some evidence supporting this argument that the increase in minimum wage will reduce employment. Here is an example in Hungary. So since 2000, the Hungary increased their minimum wage by 60% in 2 years, in 4 years. So at the same point, at the same time, people observed that that was a 2% decrease in the employment, right? So that's consistent with our model prediction.